engagement and learning more about City Hall. So we work to empower Millennial and Gen Z residents to activate their individual citizenship power to engage with their communities and participate more in city government. So we're a nonpartisan advisory group, we're an education program, we're a sounding board for some City Hall leaders who want to run their ideas by young people. And we're also a pretty competitive sort of professional development network. So that's sort of a very general description. You can see some members here talking with Chief Brophy, who is, he does general operations of the city. So you can tour City Hall, do things like that. So here, these are our program's main 3 goals. There's a lot that happens at a municipal government level. If you're a fan of Parks and Rec, maybe you know this, and if you're not, pretty much everything from, you know, the way that your sidewalk looks, where trash cans are located in your neighborhood, to who represents you at the city government level, to if there's a park or a library near you, all those things, if your kids go to public school, all of those things obviously are done by the government, and then in our case, the city of Boston. So there really is so much to learn. I am learning more in this job every day. There's over 200 departments at the city. All of them do something a little bit different. And many of them work together on even bigger and better causes. So there's just a lot to go over. So folks are on the council for a year, and they have the time to learn about that. We also work to connect them with one another and with the administration at City Hall. We meet monthly, and every month somebody comes from the city to present on the work they do. So in recent meetings, we've had Chief of Health and Human Services, Marty Martinez, who you may have seen at some press conferences, to talk about the COVID vaccine and talk about the city's ongoing efforts to keep its citizens safe. We've also had the recent Chief of Equity, Carolyn Crockett, come and talk about the racial wealth gap, the creation of the Office of Equity, and the first of her kind position. We've also had, you know, anything from food access to what people who are studying the tree canopy in Boston. Really, all these things are things that are, you know, young people, anything that young people care about at the city level. We try to connect them to those folks at the administration and with one another, their neighbors, their personal and social networks, professional networks. And then we also, they also work together as a cohort of 45 individuals to develop programming that improves the lives of young adults in Boston and allows themselves to be represented in the city's work. So this can look like conversations. I'll have some more examples later, but long story short, just stuff that kind of demystifies city government, but also works to get other young folks involved. So in their year long term, I kind of mentioned this, to be a part of Spark, you do have to live in the city of Boston. It's a city program. I, as an employee, also have to live in the city of Boston. So that's the main commitment, and be between the ages of 20 and 35. They attend monthly meetings, as I mentioned, where we do all of our general business and hear from either local nonprofit leaders or city leaders about, you know, what's going on in their work. They have to attend one community meeting a month and report back. This is a requirement that's become kind of easier for them in COVID times because of the virtual components. So whether that's sitting in on a city council meeting or hearing, testifying at one of those, visiting their local civic association, as well as you know, potentially community, you know, other community meetings, abutters meetings, development meetings. There's a bunch of, Boston is granting a whole bunch of cannabis licenses. So there's been a lot of new dispensary hearings. So these are all places that young people, even though they make up a majority of the city of Boston, are often missing. It's kind of, these meetings are more serve the priorities of homeowners traditionally, and renters are less likely to know about them and to be involved. So it's a really good way for us to not only provide a network, like a cycle of feedback to know what's going on, and for us to stay informed and figure out what kind of things we want to prioritize in the coming months. But it also lets, you know, the older city leaders know that young people do care about these issues. They are invested. We're showing up. And so beyond that, they also serve as ambassadors for the city in their neighborhood and beyond, and they have to work on 3 events, initiatives. So we have a big social media presence. You can work on campaigns for that. You can produce events. We do a ton in person. Obviously now they're all virtual. I think, yeah, so just you have to work on different things. I'm the only staff person. I took out a joke photo of the Spark Boston staff that is just a picture of me. But that is a joke I make a lot. So I'm looking for people who can volunteer, who are engaged in their community, but have the time to also help us with this stuff. Because everything that I can't do, I need other people to help me with. And we've also added the option of staying on for an additional year. Typically the terms were a year long, but we're now looking at a mixed model, just so that, you know, institutional knowledge stays on. You don't just get 40 brand new people every year who don't know what's happening. So where we kind of fit in the city of Boston, this is now, as of yesterday, with the third mayor that we've worked with. So we were established in 2004 under Mayor Menino and rebranded when Mayor Walsh took office in 2015. Yeah, that sounds right. And then, my position sits inside Boston Planning and Development Agency. That's an agency you're going to hear a lot about in the upcoming election, but it builds all of Boston's housing. And I do my work mostly inside the Civic Engagement Cabinet with the Office of Neighborhood Services, which runs a ton of really essential services for City of Boston and serves as a main constituent point of contact. So as we see Spark as an entry point for young people, that's a little bit different. There's a lot of other, you know, age or demographic based services at City of Boston that serve as entry points. You know, if you think about like our Age Strong Commission, which is for Boston residents 55 and up, or Office of Immigrant Advancement that helps immigration. This is like that, but it's for, you know, people who don't, people who are just between the ages of 20 and 35 and may not have anywhere else to go. We've also, given that we've been in existence for, we're going 17 years now, we've gotten some pretty notable alum. State Representative Liz Miranda was on 1 and 3, which is what it used to be called. And its current city councilor, Kenzie Bach, and some pretty big City of Boston staff leaders, Jacqueline Youngblood, who's the Chief of Staff at the Mayor's Office of New Urban Mechanics, Taylor Kane, who heads up the Mayor's Housing Innovation Lab, and Natalia Urtube, who is the Director of Small Business at City of Boston, all are fairly recent alums. So people do find a life in public service with us. So a little bit more about who we represent. Oops, sorry. A little bit more about who we represent and this age demographic in Boston. 39% of Boston residents are between the ages of 18 and 34. So this does represent a majority of the city based on age demographics. However, they are often absent in the halls of power, which is a massive issue because, you know, they are not children, they vote. They're not all college students. That's another kind of popular myth, but only 1 in 5 Bostonians is a college student. But, you know, 1 in 3 was the original name. It's actually more than that now. It's more like 1 in 2.5 or whatever. Of that group, we know that Boston is a very racially segregated city. It's also a very generationally segregated city, with 50% of residents in those ages, in our age bracket, living in just 5 of the 21 or 24, depending on who you're asking, Boston neighborhoods. So they live in group quarters. They have a lower median personal income. Often they have student loans. They're highly educated, but often underemployed. And they're passionate about things like housing affordability, economic justice, climate justice. And I think what's most interesting for me is the look at wanting to improve things for all generations and for all people, and to make things easier than it's been for them, which I think sometimes is a sentiment that can be lacking from some other generations. But yeah, so these are, you know, that's some statistics, I guess, are some very basic accomplishments. You might recognize this man. He's now running for mayor, John Barrows. We did have a chief chat with him. That was actually our very last event before COVID shut us down. We have also developed a lot of virtual programming like Civic Coffees, which is, I'm pointing like that's where my video is, but I guess I don't know where the video shows up in your screen, but so Civic Coffees is a monthly civic conversation with civic leaders, kind of talking about their journey and how they got to there, to help people understand more about, you know, all the different pathways to public service. We've done, you know, conferences, brunches, you know, workshop challenges, future childcare, home ownership and lending socials to try to promote millennial home ownership. We've worked every year with City Wake, which is a program at Greater Boston Chamber for the Fierce Urgency of Now Festival, which is dedicated to uplifting and supporting millennials of color. So this is just sort of a smattering of stuff, but really we do a whole lot of things. Happy to talk more specifically about programming. I think, yeah, I only have a few slides left, and then I will definitely open up the conversation. Would love to see your faces and just hear what you're interested in and what you want to know more about. Kind of coming up next for us, our next event is on Wednesday. All of our events are open to the general public and targeted at just young people in Greater Boston. You can obviously participate in events and be a part of them, even if they are not, even if you don't live in Boston, you just can't be on the council. We're trying to keep young Bostonians as a priority for this new administration. I've met with Mayor Janie and she's super excited about our work. So I'm hopeful that that will not be too difficult. We have this Chief Chat next week. Chief Chat's another kind of pillar series for us where we interview chiefs of cabinets and departments at the city who may not be as well known by the general population. Our next one with Chief Benford, he's the Chief of Emergency Management and has done so much amazing stuff for the pandemic, but is not really a face or a name you see kind of showing up in the news or anything. So it helps people know that, you know, there's actually 18,000 people who work for the city of Boston, and it's not just the mayor or city council. There's a lot of civil servants who are really doing important work. So yeah, we have another Civic Coffees coming up with the Juma Project, really excited about that. We're working with the full Civic Engagement Cabinet for Civic Engagement Week, which is April 18th to 24th. We'll have a couple different events in there. We have some racial justice programming that's been a little bit difficult to do virtually, but we're pushing ahead on that. And then we're also looking at mental health and what a return to society post-COVID might look like for young people. And as I alluded to earlier, 2021 is a local election year. We always do a ton around voting. Youth voter turnout in local elections is super low. So that's something we, as nonpartisan, it's a little difficult, but we always try to, promote advocacy in that way. So I was talking with Laura and she mentioned that there might be some like general city of Boston things you'd want to know. I have a lot of different like weird facts if you want them, but like a few things that I've sort of come to appreciate my time with City of Boston, both as a council member and now as the director. These are some ways I think it's really easy to get civically engaged. Some of these are City of Boston specific, some of them are not. So as I mentioned, elections, super important. Voting, it's a big deal. Voting in every election, primaries and local elections. As you may know, that's where a lot of the decisions and seats of power are made. So, it's important to kind of participate in those. If you're not in Boston, I'm sure there are still local elections happening. I know Somerville has a city council election coming up. Brookline, I think there's always an election happening. But yeah, so there's a lot of different ways to get involved with that and get involved. A lot of our council members, despite our work being nonpartisan, are people who are involved with political campaigns as well. This is a picture of the White Bull Tavern, which may just look like a picture of a street in Boston, but it's actually a picture of the city's outdoor dining program, which just started again on March 22nd. This is where you can see they sit basically taking up parking that's not being used during the pandemic to create more outdoor dining opportunities that are safe and follow COVID protocols. So if you want to support local businesses, that's a great way to do it. I know that Boston Globe is also doing Project Takeout, which, getting takeout and just like posting about it. But outdoor dining is a great way to support businesses and to stay safe. We have there's some large concerns at City of Boston right now that our positivity rate is slightly up and 70% of those cases are 39 and under. So it's very difficult to find ways to safely engage as a young and unvaccinated population. But I think outdoor dining is a great example of one thing to do. This looks like a picture of a trash can. It is actually a picture of a community composting bin called Project Oscar, which is a name I love personally. I think this one is located in City Hall or maybe the North End. I don't know, but I use the one in Brighton because I live in Alston, but it's five different bins around the city that just collect compost and you can just bring it and put it in there. I've never been a composter. I love the environment, but I was like, there's no way I'm getting dirt and trash in my house. It's actually been super easy. I just bought compostable bags, put a little tub on my kitchen counter, put my scraps in there, and every week or so, I just walk a mile one way and back to community compost in the little bucket. But it's really great because when the weather's getting nicer, so that walk will be nicer, but also they're looking to add more sites. So please look into that program. And I think there's like a form you can request suggest where they should put their next bin, but that's a program that I really, really love. our public works is amazing. They've also been doing these local like 40% of items that end up in trash are like cloth or old clothing, and so they have textile recycling now at a lot of different locations in Boston, so definitely look into that too. Kind of 2 for 1 in there. The city census is happening right now. I mentioned being really big into census advocacy. I was in my bio, I guess. So I was an enumerator for the 2020 federal census. Actually, that happens only every 10 years. Every single year, the city of Boston does a census, and that's how they make sure that the rolls are updated for not just voting. So they won't purge you off the rolls, but you will get an inactive status. You'll have to bring your ID to vote, which is not great. That's a Massachusetts law, though. It's not city of Boston's fault, I promise. It helps update jury duty rules and helps them provide essential services. For example, they count all the dogs in your house so they can know how many neighborhoods have a high population of dogs, and look at like where future dog parks or maybe like little poop bag stands should go. So you might have seen her flying in and out, but as a new dog owner, that is something that I really appreciate, being able to count my dog this year. Boston 311 is an incredible service. That's like the main service Office of Neighborhood Services runs. It's a non-emergency line. It's also an app. I think it also has a website maybe, and then a phone number, which is just 311. And you can call and report either potholes or things that need to be fixed, people parked illegally. You can request a new tree. That's a service we learned about from our Parks Department friends over in the fall. You can request a new tree. You can, say certain trash needs to be picked up, put in a litter request. So it's really, and you can send pictures and things. And so it's a really great way to directly talk to the city and ask for things that you want. And that line, the operators who work there are so amazing, giving me, sure, as you might guess, they get all kinds of crazy calls, and they record each and every single one and try to help them best that they can. What you'll see below is a graphic for vaccination. I know that getting vaccinated is a personal decision, but we're also pushing it as a means of civic engagement. It does help our society not return to normal, but hopefully get to a safer place. So it's really important when you do become eligible to get vaccinated. We've also had our volunteers volunteering. I personally volunteering at a vaccination site. We have folks who have, I work with a couple other council members in a non-Spark related thing, helping people get appointments. So that's just something that we're really passionate about. And so that's kind of, if they asked me for one thing to tell you, it would probably be get vaccinated. So that's all I have on that, but I'm happy to, I know this was certainly not, oh, I guess I can stop sharing. Okay, I know this was certainly not fully comprehensive, but there's a lot that we do. That's Spark, and happy to take any questions.
If you have any questions, feel free to take yourself off mute as well.
Audrey, I do have a question. I'm curious, you mentioned a bunch of events that Spark hosts. Can anybody attend those events, and how do we go about signing up for them?
Yeah, so anybody can attend those events. We do have a newsletter. Maybe I'll see if I can drop that in the chat. That's a really great, unfortunately we sent out one today. So given that I run that, I don't know when I'll send my next one. But I think so we have a pretty heavy social media presence. We usually run them through like Eventbrite. A lot of our events are just live streamed onto our Facebook page. So it's a really easy way to access them. But yeah, anyone can attend them from any walk of life. They're definitely geared towards, a lot of the services they talk about will be very Boston specific, and it'll be geared towards 20 to 35-year-olds in general, but anyone is welcome to those.
Awesome, thank you.
Hey, Audrey, this is Katie. I have a question about the census that I don't know if you'll be able to answer. So I am a renter in Boston, but because I end up moving every year, I've never actually changed my permanent address to Boston. I still use my parents'. Is the census something that like I should fill out to, like account for like me, my car, and my dog, which are all in the city? Yeah, that's a great question. Yes, you should fill out your census every year. The slide that I had some details on how to do it online, but actually you should, the best way, I think, and the easiest way is they do actually mail, or should have mailed to every single person. And it's okay if you throw it out because it looks kind of normal, but so they mail it to every house and you have to update every year.
I've actually lived in this apartment that I'm in right now 5 years, and I've had so many different roommates. So every year I just make sure to like cross out like who's left and add who's here now. And I added our dog this year, as I mentioned. So yes, definitely do still fill out. It's for any and all residents, permanent or not, in the city of Boston. So if you have an apartment that is, I mean, to me, that's like, I mean, maybe not for you in like your mail because you moved, but like that is technically a permanent address. I'm not really sure how they would do it with college dormitories, since that is something that can change even more frequently than just like once a year. But yes, definitely fill that out. I know that they've gotten maybe like 12 or 13,000 already. There's not a specific deadline, but also I know even if it's, I would still, this is like my pitch to like still register to vote in where you're living. I know a lot of people come from other states that might be battleground states and feel, you know, one way or the other about voting there. I will say that that is awesome. I do think it is awful that we and this is like my political beliefs, not Sparks, that we have to kind of try to defraud the Electoral College to elect the people that we want to elect to president. And those elections every 4 years, yes, are so important, but your elections for senator, your elections for your representatives in Congress, your local elections, all of those, you can only participate in if you register where you live. And so I have a lot of friends who come from other places who are like, oh, it doesn't matter, I'm registered as a Democrat or whatever in Massachusetts. It actually matters super, super much. Our most recent local election, one of our city council at large seats was determined by one vote. So like, you literally can have the power to put someone in or out of office personally, which you certainly can't have at the national level. Sorry. So I think that, you know, your vote super matters in Boston. So I would say, even if it's not your permanent address, it's a pain in the butt, but just a few minutes online, I would recommend that you change your voting registration every year or two, just because then, you know, you can elect the people who talk for you on a daily basis.
So I have a question. When are applications due if you are interested in joining the council?
That's a super great question. So we actually went through a recruitment process in what was that? Maybe October, and we just started a new term in January. With everything with the new mayor, I'm not really sure how things will go moving forward, but I do know that we'll probably be looking for people again, maybe for September. We used to do September to September terms, but that kind of got interrupted by the pandemic. Now it's a January start term. So fall at the very, very latest, we'll be looking for people for 2022. But there's so many other things we have. I would recommend, just like, also because it will be helpful in your sort of like group interview application process to know a little bit more about the program. And we love when people bring a vision to us. So we're also a super collaborative organization. So depending on, I'm sure you guys will do some really awesome volunteer stuff and work a lot of cool places. So if there's things around civic engagement you wanna work on, it definitely would love for you to reach out. A lot of our stuff is kind of squeaky wheel gets the grease, and it's also completely determined by our volunteer staff, and I'm just trying to support their dreams. So I do also pitch them ideas that I like and see who has, see which ones get support. But yeah, so the applications, yeah, we'll do a huge push around that again, but we're waiting. I don't want to do, I just started in September, full disclosure. And I don't really want to do another virtual recruitment because it was incredibly difficult. So I'm hoping that whenever things go back, we can start doing things in person. We're a pretty large group, so there's not actually a date in sight for us to gather fully in person. So we've been doing this over Zoom like you have. But obviously, I think particularly for our newer members, we're missing some of that personal connection. So kind of hoping to give them a little bit of that before we add more new people to the mix. But we're always, you know, we have like a summer program that's going to be happening that we're hoping to do hybrid. That's sort of like a crash course in civic engagement. So there's lots of other opportunities to get connected. It's not just being on the council.
Audrey, I have a question for you. This is Claire.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us today. Really appreciate all of the insight you've given us. And one of the things that I loved on your slides and that I have loved in Boston has been the outdoor dining initiative. And I think it's so great that it was brought back again. I mean, I really felt like at that point in the pandemic last year, starting to see all of the restaurants, you know, open on their patios and seeing people kind of alive in the streets and, just kind of having fun really, was a light in the pandemic. And so I think that's a great thing that the city of Boston did. And I'm wondering if you have, based on your work in Spark, if you have any insight as to whether or not that's something that might become a seasonal permanent opportunity for restaurants.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would certainly love it. I think that a lot of people, oh, thank you for that. That is the link I meant to share, but never did, Shannon. Appreciate it. So I think that is definitely something that we're interested in having continue as young people, as you mentioned. A lot of the people that I work, so I mentioned I work at BPDA, so I work with a lot of city planners who love like a parklet or like engagement opportunity in the street. They love bike lanes. So I think, and as someone, if you've ever traveled Europe, a lot of places are like this, just like all the time. So I think there's definitely an interest for that. I think it's going to take a lot of, I think, one, advocacy is super important because by this time next year, we may have yet another different mayor. So I will go back to local elections and supporting people who have plans to, further small business recovery and take lessons learned from the pandemic as opposed to kind of diving. I think COVID has been able to highlight so many systemic inequities. And I would say like car parking and, like I'm not someone who has a car. I mean, I know lots of people do, but I personally do not care about parking. I know that might be a controversial opinion, but if you're advocating, for more active transit, public transportation, all that stuff kind of comes into play because what they're taking up, particularly like in the North End, is parking spaces. So if we can advocate in our city planning in your neighborhood, getting involved with, I would also recommend signing up for like, there are neighborhood newsletters with City of Boston. There's also the BPDA does neighborhood specific newsletters that talks about new development. So knowing there's definitely, and like, I think it never hurts to like call 311 and be like, I love outdoor dining. Like that's never hurts, to give like the positive. They get a lot of negative feedback. So I'm sure people are always happy to get positive feedback too. So I think that's like some ways to advocate for it. I do hope it comes back, but again, it's really, we're like in a transition. And so it's just kind of hard to say, but I'm glad that was something that Mayor Walsh really prioritized. And that was one of, listening to local business owners and constituents about how they wanted how to gather safely, because gathering is something that humans want to do. And after being isolated for a long time, that's really difficult to not be able to do. So just continuing to advocate for those kinds of things. And also that, protecting, hazard pay for restaurant workers, things like that that are like general things that could like help the situation. But yeah, I'm personally super excited about outdoor dining. I know the North End hasn't actually opened up yet. I think their outdoor dining opens up April 1st because it's very complicated over there. They are a lot of restaurants competing for very little real estate on the street there. So yeah.
Thank you.
Of course.
Any other questions?
I actually do have one more, sorry.
Oh my God, no. Don't apologize.
I'm curious about this is more personal, as you were a Spark Boston member, I'm curious what made you decide to become the director? What made you stand out to get that role? Anything you want to share about that?
Yeah, so I guess for standing out, it was kind of special because, it was special and difficult because the final three candidates, I think, were all other council members of mine, which felt really good in the sense of I was going to go to somebody who knew the work and understood it. Personally, I was unemployed, so that made the decision of applying for it pretty easy. As I mentioned a little bit in my bio, I work in the arts, and many arts workers in the city of Boston was laid off due to COVID over the summer, which is how I became a census enumerator. And I had cared about the census before and then cared way more. So those were, working on the council. I was really, I think, getting involved with the council originally. I was someone who was really interested in the intersection of arts and civics, which wasn't a super popular kind of entry point for a lot of the other people on council. I mean, we do get a lot of state aides, people who work in Beacon Hill and work in City Hall. And I think what ended up being actually kind of valuable for this is that I have what like they would call an outsider's perspective, which is good. It's made it a little challenging to connect with City Hall more, given that, as you can see, I'm in my bedroom and not at my desk on the 9th floor. So that's been a little challenging, but I will say that, yeah, I was really excited about this job. I'm really passionate about, I'm personally 26, so I'm really passionate about being a millennial. I have a lot of love for my generation when a lot of other people do not. And I think that it is something that I just really, it's the people I care about. It's who I care about. Not to say I don't care about other generations, but like it is, you know, those are the people who are kind of like moving and shaking, and specifically in Allston, because that's where I live, and in many other neighborhoods in the city. And so supporting them, I personally, but Spark also kind of has a mission to keep young people in Boston and help them see that it's a city not to just to visit for an education. Boston and Cambridge have long had the problem of the brain drain, having the very brightest come here for school and then promptly leave. I actually went to Emerson College, as maybe my bio mentioned, and because it's an art school, you know, I lost 2/3 of my social circle within 3 weeks of graduation as they moved to New York and LA. And as a young person, I thought that sucked, and that I wished that there were more opportunities for them here so they didn't have to go make their career elsewhere. So I think, you know, developing and strengthening all of Boston's industries and also seeing, you know, making sure it stays affordable. I think the issues of gentrification and the affordable housing crisis are definitely ones that are near and dear to me, as many of my friends have had to move either outside of the region as a whole or just outside of city proper. And so are always asking me about like politics and things, and I can't help them because they live in Everett or Watertown or whatever it is. So yeah, that's kind of, so I just got really involved with it because civic engagement is something I've always been pretty passionate about, but not from sort of the traditional set. And then learning you can make a career in public service was something that was really exciting to me. It's kind of how I felt also about being in the arts and working at small businesses, but really anything that you do, probably the city has a job for that. Not to say I'm like here to hand out city jobs, but they're a huge employer, awesome benefits. And yeah, it's just like a really interesting and exciting network to be a part of. I will say mayoral transition is like a potential job risk. So we're all just happy to be employed right now. But I think that, yeah, there's just like, I was born here. I love Boston. And I'm really passionate about young people also continuing to love Boston. So things like, you know, there are certain things that come up for us that are less, I don't know, I guess like slideshow inspirational in the sense of like advocating for like more, you know, late night hours. Like people want to move to New York because the MTA never closes, but like RT does. So advocating for things that make Boston, continue to make Boston an awesome place to live, like the outdoor dining, I think is super, super important, because it's a beautiful place. It's just, you know, could be more welcoming to young people and all people. So that's something we're really passionate about working on. Hopefully that answered your question.
Definitely. Thank you so much.
Okay.
As a millennial, I appreciate all that you're doing. I think it's so cool. So thank you.
Yeah, I feel I'm not like feuding with City of Boston right now, but I am. A lot of the messaging around young people and COVID has been really difficult to kind of witness as both a city employee and a young person. Like, you know, the people I know who are young and have COVID are because they were forced to go to work because they're junior staff members, not because they're hosting, you know, St. Patrick's Day parties in South Boston, which is not to say that that doesn't happen, but that's not who our generation is as a whole. It's just like hard workers who are really facing the brunt of the crisis. You know, 1 in 4 young people nationally are unemployed, and people aren't talking about the implications on this generation. So it's really important to me to keep advocating for the 20 to 35-year-olds, because they've been going through a lot for many years, and now it's a lot more.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Any other questions? All right. Well, Audrey, thank you so much for doing this tonight.
Yeah,
we really
absolutely.
appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been always great to talk about Spark's work. And I'll pop my email in the chat. I'm like, as you can see, I work alone in my bedroom, and I do genuinely love meeting people. Meeting constituents is definitely always one of the highlights of it. I almost gave you my personal email. That's not what I want to do. That is my boss.gov email. And so if you need like truly anything, I know it's a difficult time. So I say this a lot, but I do actually mean it, is like, you know, there's probably hopefully a city service that can help no matter what you're going through. And if it's just a matter of knowing what it is and connecting you to it, I'm happy to do that too. Also happy just to talk more Spark stuff. And like, if you want to get involved, that's my email. So yeah, thank you so much for having me. Shannon and Laura, thanks for organizing and running this. Been a delight to work with you both.
Yeah, it's been great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Awesome. Have a good night, everybody.
Have a good night, everyone.